Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets across the frozen landscape of Tundra 9. The wind howled between jagged ice formations, creating an eerie melody that echoed through the empty plains. In the distance, a small research outpost stood as the only sign of life on this barren moon. Its lights blinked against the darkening sky as another ice storm approached. Inside the main control room of the Rion Collective Outpost, June stared at his scanner with growing interest. The senior xenobiologist had been monitoring the area for 3 standard cycles, and something unusual had just appeared on his readings. "Energy signature detected in Sector 7, he said, his gray fingers tapping the glowing screen. It wasn't there yesterday. Hana, the outpost supervisor, glided across the room. Her silver uniform marked her higher rank among the tall, slender Rion aliens. "Show me," she said, her voice flat and practical. June enlarged the image, revealing a pulsing dot of light on the map. "It's coming from the ice canyon about 2 miles from here. The pattern suggests biological origin, not geological." Hana frowned. The Rion were known across the galaxy for their scientific approach and careful observation. Their tall, thin bodies and gray skin had evolved for efficiency, much like their emotions, which were kept strictly controlled. "The storm will arrive in 4 hours, Hana noted. "Any expedition would need to return before then." June stood up, his excitement barely contained despite years of emotional training. "I can take the small rover and be back within 3 hours. This could be important." After a moment of calculation, Hana nodded. "You may go. Take emergency supplies in case the weather changes faster than predicted. I will accompany you to ensure protocols are followed." 20 minutes later, the small rover sped across the icy plains. June drove while Hana monitored their progress on a portable scanner. The vehicle's heated interior protected them from the bitter cold outside, where temperatures regularly dropped to -70 degrees. "The signal is getting stronger," June said, as they approached the massive ice canyon. "It's coming from that cave entrance." The rover came to a stop at the edge of a deep ravine. Below them, a dark opening in the ice wall seemed to swallow all light. June and Hana put on their thermal suits and stepped out into the freezing air. "We have 2 hours and 40 minutes before we must start back," Hana reminded, as they carefully made their way down the slippery path to the cave. The entrance was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. Their suit lights cast long shadows on the ice walls, which sparkled like thousands of tiny stars. The further they went, the stronger the energy reading became. "Just ahead," June whispered, though there was no need for quiet. Something about the cave made loud noises seem wrong. They turned a corner and stopped suddenly. The narrow passage opened into a small chamber. In the center, nestled in what looked like a nest made of crystal shards, lay 2 small creatures. "Impossible," Hana breathed, her usual emotional control slipping for a moment. The creatures were unlike anything they had seen before on Tundra 9. Each was about the size of June's forearm, with emerald green scales that gave off a faint glow. Their bodies were clearly reptilian, with small wings folded against their sides and long tails curled around their bodies for warmth. They had the unmistakable appearance of infant dragons, creatures of legend in many cultures, including the Rion's ancient past. June stepped closer, scanning them with his handheld device. "They're alive, but barely. Their body temperatures are dangerously low." A small wisp of steam escaped from one dragon's nostrils as it took a labored breath. The other one opened its eyes briefly, revealing golden irises with vertical pupils, before closing them again, too weak to stay awake. "These are Vorith offspring," Hana said, her voice filled with rare awe. "I am certain of it." The name hung in the air between them. Every Rion child knew about the Vorith, ancient beings of great power who were said to have helped the Rion ancestors survive the Great Darkness centuries ago. The semi-divine dragons had disappeared, passing into legend, with only ancient texts speaking of their ability to change whole planets with their elemental powers. "They must be taken back to the outpost immediately," June said, already removing thermal blankets from his pack. "They won't survive much longer in this cold." Hana put a firm hand on his arm, stopping him. "No, we cannot interfere." June looked at her with confusion. They will die without help. The Elder's directive is clear, Hana stated, her emotional control firmly back in place. We observe only. These creatures are part of this moon's ecosystem. Now, if they cannot adapt, they will perish. That is the way of natural selection. But they're not native to this moon, June argued. Their biological makeup isn't adapted for these temperatures. They should never have been here. Hana's face hardened. It does not matter how they came to be here. The standing orders from the Science Council are absolute. Non-interference is our highest principle. Without it, our research loses all value. One of the dragon hatchlings made a small chirping sound like a weak cry for help. Its green scales had dulled to a sickly gray-green. June looked at the dying creatures, then back at his superior. The Vorith helped our ancestors survive. Don't we owe their kind something in return? We owe them the respect of scientific objectivity, Hana replied coldly. Our ancestors' stories are not scientifically verified. We deal in facts, not legends. She turned and began walking toward the cave. Entrance. We have collected valuable data. The storm approaches. We must return now. June stood motionless, his scanner still pointed at the struggling hatchlings. The device showed their heartbeats growing fainter. That is an order, senior xenobiologist, Hana called without looking back. Document their location. We will return after the storm to observe the outcome. With great reluctance, June took several detailed scans and images of the dragons and their nest. He marked the exact coordinates in his device. As he turned to Wai, follow Hana, he looked back one last time at the helpless creatures. I'm sorry, he whispered before leaving the chamber. Outside, the wind had picked up strength. The storm was coming faster than predicted. Snowflakes whipped around them as they climbed back into the rover. The journey back to the outpost was silent, with only the howling wind and the rover's engine making any sound. June's thoughts remained with the twin dragon hatchlings, alone, in the dark, slowly freezing to death. What neither of them knew was that their conversation in the cave had been overheard. The outpost's communication system had automatically connected to their suit microphones, broadcasting their discovery to anyone listening on the main channel. And someone had been listening. Someone who did not share the Ryun's cold logic about non-interference. Someone human. Taehyun sat alone in the small communications room, his fingers frozen above the control panel. He had been updating the Earth Embassy when the live feed from June and Hana's expedition came through on the open channel. Now, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had heard. Dragons. Actual, living dragons. And the Ryun were going to let them die. As the only human assigned to the outpost as part of the new interspecies exchange program, Taehyun often felt like an outsider. The Ryun were brilliant scientists, but their emotional detachment sometimes made them seem cold to him. Never had this difference felt more stark than now. He replayed June's coordinates in his mind. The ice canyon wasn't far, but with the storm growing stronger by the minute, it might as well be on another planet. Outside the window, snow was already falling in thick sheets. The outpost's weather system had upgraded the storm warning. All personnel were ordered to remain inside until it passed, which could take up to 3 days. 3 days would be too late for those dragon hatchlings. Taehyun paced his small living quarters, trying to focus on his assigned work, but the image of dying baby dragons kept interrupting his thoughts. His people had myths about dragons too. Powerful, wise creatures that brought luck and protection. The idea of standing by while they froze to death made his stomach twist. This is crazy, he muttered to himself, but he was already pulling his thermal gear from the storage unit. The emergency supplies were kept in a storage room near the vehicle bay. Taehyun waited until the night shift began, when most of the Ryun were either working in their labs or resting in their quarters. He moved quietly through the empty hallways, his heart pounding. The supply room was unlocked. The Ryun rarely worried about theft among their logical, rule-following kind. Taehyun quickly gathered what he needed. Extra thermal blankets, heat packs, a portable heater, nutrition packs, and a medical kit. The hover sled was the trickier part. Taking the main rovers would be noticed immediately, but the smaller maintenance sleds might go unmissed for a few hours. He chose the oldest one, thinking it would be the last one anyone would check for. The vehicle bay doors opened with his general access code. Cold air rushed in, bringing with it swirling snow. The temperature reading showed -55 degrees and dropping. The storm was getting worse. Taehyun secured his helmet and activated his suit's heating system. He loaded his supplies onto the hover sled and checked that the navigation system had the coordinates from June's expedition. With one last glance back at the warm lights of the outpost, he headed out into the storm. The journey that had taken June and Hana less than 30 minutes now took Taehyun over an hour. The wind fought him every inch of the way, and visibility was so poor that he had to rely completely on the navigation system. Twice, the hover sled nearly tipped over when it hit hidden ice ridges. Finally, the navigation system beeped, indicating he had reached the canyon edge. Taehyun peered through the swirling snow. The path down to the cave was now completely covered in fresh powder, making the descent even more dangerous. No turning back now, he said to himself, securing a rope to the hover sled and to his suit. If he fell, at least he wouldn't plummet to the bottom of the canyon. The climb down was slow and terrifying. 3 times his feet slipped on hidden ice and only the rope saved him from falling. His hands, despite the heated gloves, began to grow numb. The cold was seeping through his thermal suit faster than its systems could fight it. At last, he reached the cave entrance. Inside it was quieter, the howling of the wind reduced to a distant moan. Taehyun followed his suit lights deeper into the cave, checking the coordinates on his wrist display. When he reached the crystal chamber, his heart sank. The 2 dragon hatchlings lay exactly where June had described them, but they weren't moving. Their once glowing scales had dimmed to a dull green-gray. Were they already dead? Taehyun rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside the crystal nest. He pulled off his glove and gently touched one of the small creatures. It was cold, far too cold, but when his fingers made contact, the tiny dragon's eyelids fluttered. It was alive, but barely. Working quickly, Taehyun activated several heat packs and tucked them around the nest. He wrapped both hatchlings together in a thermal blanket, careful not to separate them. Then he set up the portable heater, creating a small warm zone in the icy chamber. "Hang on, little ones," he whispered, gently stroking their heads with one finger. "We've got a long way to go." After 15 minutes in the warmer environment, the dragons began to show more signs of life. Their breathing became more regular, and occasionally one would make a tiny chirping sound. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Taehyun hope. Getting them back to the hover sled was the next challenge. He fashioned a small carrier from his supply pack, lining it with more thermal blankets. With extreme care, he lifted the bundled dragons and placed them inside. They were surprisingly light, weighing no more than a couple of pounds each. The climb back up to the canyon edge was even worse than the descent. Taehyun's muscles burned with the effort, and the weight of the dragon carrier threw off his balance. Halfway up, the wind shifted, blasting him with ice particles that stung his face through the helmet visor. By the time he reached the hover sled, the storm had intensified to near blizzard conditions. The navigation system warned that several routes back to the outpost were now impassable due to snowdrifts. Taehyun secured the dragon carrier to the sled, making sure it was stable and that the heating unit was still working. Then he plotted an alternative route back, longer but safer. The return journey took almost 2 hours. Twice Taehyun had to stop to clear ice from the sled's intake vents. His own body temperature was dropping despite his suit's best efforts, and his thoughts began to grow sluggish, an early sign of hypothermia. When the outpost finally appeared through the snow, Taehyun nearly wept with relief. He bypassed the main vehicle bay, instead taking the sled to a rarely used maintenance entrance. His access code still worked there, thankfully. Getting the dragons to his quarters without being seen was his next problem. The night shift was still on duty, but he might encounter someone in the hallways. He wrapped the carrier in his outer thermal gear to hide it and tried to walk normally despite his exhaustion. Luck was with him. He made it to his quarters without meeting anyone. Once inside, he locked the door and quickly set about creating a proper environment for the dragons. His room's environmental controls were designed for human comfort: far warmer than the average Ryun preferred. Taehyun turned the heat up even higher, then cleared off his desk to make space for a makeshift incubator. He used the portable heater, his spare blankets, and even dismantled his room's lighting panel to create a heat lamp. The dragons, when he unwrapped them, looked even worse, under the bright light. Their scales were dull, and their tiny bodies trembled continuously. According to his research tablet, reptiles this cold might have organ damage. "You need food," he said, preparing a mixture of the protein supplement from the emergency kit with warm water. Using a small dropper from the medical kit, he carefully placed tiny amounts of the liquid into their mouths. At first, they were too weak to swallow properly, and Taehyun feared they would choke. But after a few patient tries, they began to drink. Their eyes, golden with vertical pupils, occasionally flickered open, regarding him with what seemed like confusion. For the next 3 days, Taehyun barely left his quarters. He told the outpost AI he was feeling unwell and requested to work from his room. Not entirely a lie, as he was exhausted and still recovering from his exposure to the cold. He skipped meals in the common area, instead having basic nutrition, packs delivered to his door. Every spare moment was spent caring for the dragons, feeding them, monitoring their temperature, and researching xenobiology on his tablet. Slowly, the hatchlings began to improve. Their scales regained some of their emerald color, and they became more active, exploring the boundaries of their makeshift home. They made chirping sounds when they saw Taehyun, seeming to recognize him as their caretaker. On the 3rd day, as the storm finally began to subside outside, Taehyun watched in amazement as one of the dragons stood up on shaky legs and spread its tiny wings for the first time. The other soon followed, and together they practiced small hops around their nest. "You're going to make it," Taehyun said with a tired smile. He didn't notice that the room's temperature had risen well above what his environmental controls were set for, or that the dragon's scales were now glowing with an inner light that grew brighter by the hour. On the 4th day after the rescue, Taehyun woke to an alarming sight. His desk chair was melting. One of the dragons was perched on it, looking curiously at the plastic as it dripped onto the floor. The room temperature had risen to nearly 90 degrees despite the environmental controls being set much lower. "Hey, stop that," Taehyun said, jumping out of bed. The dragon tilted its head and made a chirping sound that almost sounded like a question. Its scales were now a brilliant emerald, green glowing with inner light. The second dragon was exploring the far corner of the room, its tail leaving small scorch marks on the wall. Over the past few days, the dragons had grown stronger and more active. They were now the size of small cats, with wingspans that stretched about 2 feet when fully extended. Their recovery had been remarkable, but with it came unexpected problems. Taehyun had discovered that the dragons' bodies generated intense heat when they were excited or curious, which, as infants exploring a new world, was most of the time. Their tails left burn marks on everything they touched, and their breath could warm metal to uncomfortable temperatures. He had just picked up the chair-melting dragon when a loud alarm began blaring throughout the outpost. "Environmental anomaly detected. Sector 12, Unit 7, announced the outpost's AI system. Temperature exceeding safety parameters. Unit 7 was Taehyun's quarters. "Oh no," he whispered, looking at the 2 dragons, who were now both alert and agitated by the noise. Their bodies grew hotter in response to the alarm, making the room temperature rise even further. Taehyun barely had time to hide the dragons under his bed before his door slid open. Hana stood there, with the security chief's son right behind her. Both Ryun looked tense, their normally emotionless faces showing concern. "Human Taehyun, the environmental system indicates an extreme heat source in your quarters," Hana said, stepping inside. Her eyes widened slightly at the wave of hot air that met her. "Explain." "I was just testing some earth-cooking techniques," Taehyun lied, moving to block their view of the melted chair. "Sorry about that." Sun, the security chief, moved past him, scanning the room with a handheld device. "The heat signature is inconsistent with cooking equipment. It appears to be biological in nature." A small chirping sound came from under the bed. Sun turned sharply toward the sound. "What was that?" Before Taehyun could answer, one of the dragons darted out from its hiding place, apparently tired of being confined. It scampered across the floor and up the wall, leaving a trail of small burn marks. The second dragon followed moments later, spreading its wings and gliding awkwardly to land on Taehyun's shoulder. Hana stared in shock. "The Vorith hatchlings," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You took them from the cave." The dragon on Taehyun's shoulder chirped again, then nuzzled against his neck affectionately. Its scales were hot but didn't burn him, as if it somehow knew to control its temperature around him. "I couldn't leave them to die," Taehyun said, straightening his back. "They're living creatures." Sun stepped forward, raising his scanner toward the dragon on the wall. "These beings are not authorized to be on this outpost. They represent an unknown biological hazard. Security protocol requires immediate containment." "They're not a hazard," Taehyun protested. "They're just babies. And they're getting better at controlling their body heat." As if to contradict him, the dragon on the wall sneezed, sending a small puff of flame that set a nearby paper on fire. Taehyun quickly moved to put it out. "They just need time to learn," he added weakly. Hana's face hardened into the emotionless mask that the Ryun wore when making official declarations. "You have violated at least 17 outpost regulations, including unauthorized vehicle use, during a level 5 storm, theft of emergency supplies, and introduction of unquarantined biological specimens to the habitat." She tapped her wrist communicator. "This is Supervisor Hana. Assemble a containment team to Unit 7 immediately. Bring thermal-resistant equipment." Taehyun felt the dragon on his shoulder tense up. Its body temperature rose sharply in response to the tension in the room. He reached up to stroke it soothingly. "What are you going to do with them?" he asked. "The specimens will be returned to their original location as per our non-interference directive," Hana replied coldly. "The station's environmental analysis indicates current external temperature is -42 degrees. The AI helpfully informed them. Probability of specimen survival if returned to original location, 4.3%. "You're still going to let them die?" Taehyun asked in disbelief. "After seeing them alive and healthy?" "The directive is clear," Sun said firmly. "We do not interfere with natural processes." A new voice joined the conversation from the doorway. "But this is not a natural process." June, the xenobiologist who had first discovered the dragons, stepped into the already crowded room. He looked at the dragons with an expression of wonder that broke through the typical Ryun emotional restraint. "They're beautiful," he said softly. "Their recovery is remarkable." "You knew about this?" Hana asked sharply. June shook his head. "Not until the alarm sounded. But I've been thinking about them since we left them in the cave." He turned to Hana. "I've analyzed my scans more thoroughly. These creatures are not native to this moon. Their biological structure is adapted for environments with average temperatures above 80 degrees. They were never meant to be in that ice cave." "That is irrelevant," Hana insisted. "The non-interference directive applies to all life forms, native or not." "But these aren't just any life forms," June argued. "They're Vorith. The scans confirm it. The same species that saved our ancestors according to our historical records." The dragon that had been on the wall now glided down and landed on the floor between them. It looked up at the Ryun with intelligent golden eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. "The containment team will be here shortly," Hana finally said. "Human Taehyun, you will surrender the specimens." "No," Taehyun said firmly, putting a protective hand on the dragon nearest to him. "I won't let you kill them." Sun moved toward him. "This is not a request. It is an order." Suddenly, the dragon on Taehyun's shoulder hissed. Its body temperature spiked dramatically, causing everyone to step back. It curled its tail around Taehyun's arm in what seemed like a protective gesture. "Look at that," June said with fascination. "It's bonded with him, it's protecting him." "That is even more reason to remove them," Hana declared. "This level of interaction represents dangerous contamination of natural development." 3 more. Ryun arrived at the door carrying containment equipment. Hana nodded to them. "Secure the specimens." As the containment team moved forward, the dragon on the floor spread its wings and made a high-pitched sound that was clearly a warning. The temperature in the room shot up another 10 degrees. Equipment began to beep in alarm. "Please," Taehyun pleaded. "They don't want to hurt anyone, they're just scared." One of the containment team reached out with a long, pole-like device. The dragon on the floor backed away, its scales glowing brighter. Then in a sudden movement it released a focused burst of heat that singed the uniform of the Ryun reaching for it. The Ryun dropped the pole and backed away, looking at the small burn mark on his sleeve with surprise. "Defensive capabilities. Already developing," June observed, making notes on his tablet. "Fascinating." "This is becoming dangerous," Sun said, reaching for what looked like a weapon on his belt. "No," both Taehyun and June shouted together. What might have happened next was interrupted by a loud alarm that was different from the environmental warning. This sound was deeper, more urgent. "Priority alert," the outpost AI announced. "Unknown vessel, entering orbit. Size and configuration do not match any registered spacecraft in database." Hana's wrist communicator beeped urgently. She glanced at it, then back at the group. "We are receiving a transmission from the vessel. It's broadcasting." She paused, looking confused. "It appears to be an ancient Ryun dialect, not used for centuries." The dragons suddenly perked up, their heads tilting as if listening to something no one else could hear. The one on Taehyun's shoulder made a trilling sound that was almost musical. "They're responding to the transmission," June said excitedly. "They can hear it." Hana looked torn between her duty to enforce the rules and the unprecedented situation unfolding. "Security Chief Sun, maintain watch here. The rest of you come with me to the communication center." As they left the room, the containment team looked uncertainly at Sun, who nodded for them to go as well. He remained alone with Taehyun and the two dragons, his hand still near his weapon. "They're just looking for their family," Taehyun said, quietly, stroking the dragon on his shoulder. "That's all." The outpost lights flickered as the unknown ship moved closer. The dragon on the floor walked to the window and placed its front claws on the glass, looking up at the sky as if it knew exactly what was happening. Sun watched the creature with a mix of caution and fascination. "You truly believe they are intelligent beings, not just animals?" "Look at them," Taehyun said. "They understand far more than they should for their age. They recognize words, they problem solve, and they remember who helped them and who wanted to leave them to die." As if to prove his point, the dragon at the window turned and looked directly at Sun, its golden eyes seeming to stare. The entire outpost gathered in the main observation room. Through the large viewing window they could see the vessel that had entered orbit around Tundra 9. It was unlike any spacecraft the Ryun had seen before, a massive structure that seemed to be made of crystal and light rather than metal. It glowed with a soft blue radiance that somehow cut through the planet's stormy atmosphere. Taehyun stood near the back of the room, the two dragons perched on his shoulders. They had refused to leave his side, becoming agitated whenever anyone tried to separate them from him. Their scales glowed brighter than ever, casting emerald light across the faces of the nearby Ryun. Hana stood at the central console, her fingers moving over the controls. "The vessel is requesting permission to send representatives to our outpost," she announced. "Are they hostile?" Sun asked, his hand still resting near his weapon. "Unknown," Hana replied. "Their technology is far beyond our sensor capabilities. We cannot detect weapons, but that does not mean they are not present." June stepped forward, looking excited despite the tense situation. "The ancient texts speak of the Guardians, beings who served the Vorith. If these are truly those Guardians, they are not our enemies. They were allies to our ancestors." Hana frowned. "Those are legends, not historical facts. Yet here we are," June said, gesturing toward the crystal ship, facing something that matches those legends exactly. The dragons suddenly began making excited chirping sounds. The one on Taehyun's right shoulder spread its wings and seemed to be trying to communicate with the ship, sending out a series of high-pitched calls. "I think they know who's coming," Taehyun said. After a moment of consideration, Hana nodded. We will allow a delegation of 3 representatives. No more. She sent the message, and within minutes, a beam of light appeared in the center of the observation room. It expanded into a swirling column that reached from floor to ceiling. When it faded, 3 tall figures stood in its place. The visitors were humanoid, but clearly not human. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, with bodies that seemed partly made of the same crystal as their ship. Their skin was pale blue, marked with intricate patterns that glowed softly. They wore no obvious clothing, but parts of their bodies were covered in what looked like living armor that shifted and moved with them. The dragons immediately launched themselves from Taehyun's shoulders and flew across the room toward the visitors. The Ryun tensed, but the newcomers simply held out their arms, allowing the small dragons to land on them. They made gentle, musical sounds that the dragons seemed to understand, responding with excited chirps. The tallest of the visitors stepped forward, looking directly at Taehyun. "You are the one who saved the children of Vorith," the being said. Its voice sounded like wind chimes, beautiful but strange. "I am Lyria, first guardian of the Vorith legacy. These are my fellow guardians, Talon and Miri." "I'm Taehyun," he replied, surprised that they had singled him out. "And yes, I found them in a cave during an ice storm. They were freezing to death." Hana stepped forward. "I am Supervisor Hana of the Ryun Collective. This outpost is under our jurisdiction. Why have Vorith offspring been left on our moon?" Lyria turned her crystal gaze to Hana. "They were not left here, they were hidden here. There is a difference." The guardian named Talon moved forward, gently stroking one of the dragons on his arm. When the homeworld of the Vorith faced destruction, the last adults created stasis pods for their children and scattered them across the galaxy for safety. We, their created guardians, were sent to watch over them from afar until it was time for them to awaken. These 2 awakened too early, Miri added, her voice higher and lighter than the others. A programming error in their stasis pod caused it to release them before they were ready, before the environment was suitable. By the time we detected their life signs, the storm had already begun on this moon. We feared we would be too late, Lyria looked back at Taehyun with eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. And we would have been, if not for the courage of this human. The dragons returned to Taehyun, circling his head once before landing on his shoulders again. They seemed excited, but also comfortable with him, occasionally nuzzling against his cheeks. "They have bonded with you," Lyria observed. "That is rare. The children of Vorith usually bond only with their own kind." "What exactly are they?" Taehyun asked, gently stroking the head of the dragon on his left shoulder. "I mean, I've been calling them dragons because that's what they look like, but dragons is as good a name as any," Talon said, his crystal lips forming what might have been a smile. "On 1,000 worlds they have 1,000 names, but they are Vorith, one of the eldest species in the galaxy, capable of reshaping worlds through elemental manipulation. These children will one day command fire and heat as easily as you command your own limbs." June had been taking notes frantically on his tablet. He looked up with excitement. "So the legends are true. The Vorith did help our ancestors survive." "The Great Darkness," Miri nodded. "Yes, xenobiologist. Your people's ancestors faced extinction when your original homeworld was plunged into an ice age. A Vorith named Elar used her powers to warm the land enough for crops to grow, and for your people to survive until you could develop the technology to leave that world." Hana stepped forward again, her face showing the closest thing to emotion that Taehyun had seen from her. "If this is true, why did the Vorith leave? Why did they become only legends to us?" "The Vorith are few in number and their lifespans are long," Lyria explained. "They travel where they are needed, help where they can, then move on. They do not seek worship or payment. But their homeworld was destroyed in a cosmic cataclysm that even they could not prevent. These children are among the last of their kind." The dragon on Taehyun's right shoulder made a sad trilling sound, as if it understood what was being said. "How many survived?" Taehyun asked quietly. "Fewer than 100 eggs were saved," Talon replied. "Scattered across 20 galaxies, hidden, in places where we hoped they would be safe until the right time. These 2 are the 14th and 15th we have recovered." Sun, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. If these creatures are so important, why hide them on a frozen moon where they clearly cannot survive? The stasis pod would have maintained a perfect environment inside regardless of external conditions, Miri explained. And it would have kept them asleep for another 50 years until this moon moved into its warm season. The ice canyon was chosen because the mineral composition would hide their energy signatures from those who might wish them harm. There are those who hunt the Vorith? June asked. Lyria's face darkened. There are those who would use their powers as weapons or study them to death in an attempt to harness their abilities. We have been pursued across the stars by such people. The dragons chirped again, more urgently this time. They seemed to be trying to tell Taehyun something. I think they're hungry, he said, recognizing the sound from the past few days. Miri laughed, a sound like silver bells. Yes, they are growing quickly now. Their accelerated development has begun. Hana stepped forward once more, her posture rigid. While this explanation is fascinating, it does not change the fact that outpost regulations were violated. The human Taehyun took unauthorized actions that put this entire facility at risk. The dragons hissed at her words, their bodies growing warmer against Taehyun's neck. Regulations? Lyria asked, her crystalline features showing something like surprise. You would have let the children of your saviors die because of regulations? The non-interference directive is our highest law, Hana insisted, though her voice had less conviction than before. And yet, Talon said gently, when your ancestors were freezing to death, the Vorith chose to interfere. Had they followed your principle, the Ryun would not exist today. A murmur ran through the gathered Ryun. Many of them looked troubled by this observation. Our records indicate a debt, Miri said, consulting what seemed to be a crystal tablet that appeared in her hand. According to our understanding of Ryun cultural norms, when one saves the life of another, a life debt is created. By our calculations, your species owes the Vorith approximately 18.3 billion individual life debts, as that is the current Ryun population descended from those who were saved. The room fell silent. Even Hana seemed at a loss for words. Lyria looked around at the gathered Ryun, then back to Taehyun. The human honored that debt when you would not. He risked his life to save theirs, despite having no historical connection to them at all. That is why they have chosen him. Chosen me? Taehyun asked, confused. What do you mean? The children of Vorith choose their companions, Talon explained. Those who will raise them, teach them, and in turn be protected by them. They have formed a telepathic bond with you. Can you not feel it? Now that it was mentioned, Taehyun realized he had been sensing the dragon's emotions. Their fear during the confrontation, their excitement when the ship arrived, their hunger now. He had thought it was just his imagination or his growing familiarity with their behavior. I think I can, he said slowly. Then it is decided, Lyria announced. You will come with us, human Taehyun, to help raise these children and to find others who may still be. The Guardian vessel. Starsong was unlike any spacecraft Taehyun had ever seen. From the outside, it had appeared to be made of crystal and light. From the inside, it seemed alive. The walls pulsed gently with soft blue light, and the floor adjusted, to the comfort of whoever walked upon it. Doors opened before you reached them, and the temperature in each room automatically shifted to the preference of its occupants. Taehyun had just 1 hour to gather his belongings from the outpost before departing. He didn't own much. Some clothes, a few personal items, and his research tablet. June, on the other hand, had brought crates of scientific equipment and recording devices, all approved by Lyria after a brief inspection. Now, 3 days into their journey through space, Taehyun sat in what the Guardians called the nurturing chamber. It was a large room with a garden-like environment, complete with small trees, flowing water, and warm rocks for the dragons to rest on. The two young Vorith were currently chasing each other through the air, their wings having grown strong enough for short flights. They are developing remarkably fast, June said, looking up from his tablet where he was recording data. They've doubled in size since we left Tundra 9. The dragons were now about the size of large dogs, their emerald scales gleaming in the soft light of the chamber. They had begun to develop distinct personalities as well. The slightly larger one, which Taehyun had named Bomb, was more adventurous, always exploring new areas of the ship. The smaller one, Nara, was more cautious but more affectionate, often seeking out Taehyun for attention. The Vorith growth cycle is accelerated in the first year, Lyria explained, entering the chamber with a tray of what looked like glowing fruit. They must develop quickly to survive. After that, their aging slows dramatically. A fully mature Vorith can live for thousands of years. She set the tray down, and the dragons immediately swooped down to investigate. They sniffed at the fruit, curiously before taking tentative bites. "What exactly are they eating?" Taehyun asked. "Star fruit," Lyria replied. "Not the earth variety, but a rare plant that absorbs and stores stellar energy. It helps them develop their internal heat regulators." Bam finished his fruit first, then chirped at Taehyun, flying over to land on his shoulder. The dragon was heavier now, but Taehyun had grown used to the weight. What still surprised him was the mental connection he felt with the creatures. It wasn't exactly mind-reading, but more like sensing emotions and basic needs. "He wants to show you something," Lyria said, smiling her crystal smile. "He's been practicing." Bam hopped down from Taehyun's shoulder and moved to an open area of the chamber. The dragon took a deep breath, then exhaled a perfect ring of fire that hovered in the air for several seconds before dissolving. "That's amazing," Taehyun exclaimed, clapping his hands. Not to be outdone, Nara jumped down from the rock where she had been eating and joined her brother. She concentrated hard, her golden eyes narrowing, then produced a small ball of flame that she balanced on the tip of her tail before tossing it into the air, where it burst like a tiny firework. Jun was recording everything, his face alight with scientific excitement. Remarkable control for such young specimens. The neural pathways required for such precision must be incredibly complex. "The Vorith are born with certain instinctual abilities," Talon said, entering the chamber. "But they learn most quickly through play and imitation. Your encouragement is good for them." Taehyun had grown more comfortable around the Guardians over the past few days, though their crystal bodies and formal speech were still strange to him. He had come to appreciate their gentle wisdom and dedication to the dragons. "Where exactly are we going?" he asked as Bam returned to his shoulder, clearly proud of his fire ring demonstration. "To the sanctuary," Talon answered. "A planet we have prepared as a safe haven for the recovered Vorith children. 15 have been found so far, including your two. It is a warm world with diverse environments where they can grow and learn in safety." "And will we find more after that?" Taehyun asked. "You said there were nearly 100 eggs scattered across 20 galaxies," Lyria nodded. "That is our mission, to find all the children before those who would harm them do. It is a task that may take decades, but with your help, we believe it can be accomplished." The idea of spending decades traveling through space was still hard for Taehyun to grasp. He had signed up for the exchange program with the Ryun for just one Earth year. Now his life had changed completely in less than a week. As if sensing his thoughts, Nara flew over and landed in his lap, nuzzling against his chest comfortingly. The dragon's body was warm, and Taehyun felt a wave of what could only be described as affection flowing from her mind to his. "They truly care for you," Miri observed, entering the chamber with a small crystal device. "The bond grows stronger each day." She handed the device to Taehyun. "This will allow you to communicate with your Earth authorities. We believe they should know of your new role, and that you have not simply disappeared." Taehyun took the device, gratefully. He had been wondering how to tell his family and superiors about the dramatic change in his assignment. "Thank you," he said. "I should probably let them know I won't be back next month as planned." "Tell them you have become a dragon guardian," Talon said with a hint of pride. "It is a title of great honor among the stars, even if Earth has not heard of it yet." Later that evening, after sending messages to Earth and receiving surprisingly supportive responses, Taehyun stood in the observation dome of the Star Song. The transparent ceiling showed the vastness of space above, stars streaming by as the ship traveled faster than light. Jun joined him, setting aside his ever-present tablet for once. I never thanked you properly, the Ryan said quietly. Grumped. What? Taehyun asked. For doing what I should have done, for saving them. June looked down at his gray hands. I knew leaving them was wrong, but I followed protocol instead of my instincts. You spoke up eventually, Taehyun reminded him. That counts for something. Bam and Nara flew into the dome, circling once before landing nearby. They had taken to following Taehyun wherever he went on the ship, only leaving him alone when he slept. And sometimes not even then. He often woke to find them curled up at the foot of his bed. I have been studying Ryun historical texts, June said, watching the dragons play with a small ball of light that Miri had created for them. Our ancestors called the Vorith the breath of life because they warmed our world when it was dying. Without them, we would have perished as a species. He turned to face Taehyun directly. Yet when we found their children dying, we chose to walk away, and a human with no obligation to them at all chose to save them. I just did what felt right, Taehyun said with a shrug. That is precisely my point, June replied. The Ryun have spent centuries developing a perfect logical framework for decision-making. We believed it made us wise, but in our most important moral test we failed, and you succeeded. It has made me question everything. Before Taehyun could respond, Lyria appeared at the entrance to the dome. We are approaching the sanctuary. You may wish to observe our arrival. The observation dome darkened slightly, and a large display appeared on one wall showing the view ahead of the ship. A planet came into focus, a beautiful world of blue oceans, green forests, and golden deserts. Unlike Tundra 9, it looked warm and vibrant. Home, Lyria said simply, for the children and for you, if you wish it to be. As the ship descended toward the planet, Taehyun could make out a settlement built into the side of a mountain. Unlike human or Ryun architecture, these structures seemed to grow from the natural rock, enhanced rather than imposed upon the landscape. The other Vorith children are there? He asked. Yes, Talon answered, joining them. 13 others, each with their bonded guardians from 7 different species. You will be the first human to join our community. The dragons grew excited as they approached, chirping and flying in faster circles around the dome. They could sense they were approaching others of their kind. Will they still want me when they meet other dragons? Taehyun asked, voicing a worry that had been growing in his mind. Miri laughed her silver bell laugh. The bond is not so easily broken. They chose you, Taehyun, not because you were the only option, but because they saw something in your spirit that matched their own. That connection will only grow stronger with time. As if to confirm her words, both dragons flew to him, landing on each shoulder and pressing their heads against his cheeks. Through their mental link, he felt not just affection, but a fierce loyalty that brought tears to his eyes. They're saying I'm their family now, he said, surprised at the clarity of the message. They are beginning to communicate more directly, Lyria observed. Another sign of their rapid development. Soon they will speak in words, not just emotions and images. The ship touched down on a landing pad near the settlement. Through the view screen, Taehyun could see a group of people, or rather, beings, waiting to greet them. Some looked roughly humanoid, while others were completely alien to his eyes. And among them he saw flashes of green scales and golden eyes, more young Vorith dragons, some larger than Bam and Nara, others about the same size. You ready? June asked, his scientific equipment packed and ready to go. Tae,